Hello and welcome to this weight loss tracker Excel template tutorial. In this video, I've got two goals in mind and I'm excited to tackle them with you. First, we'll get to know this template, how it works, what it does, and the cool features it includes. Second, we'll build the entire template from scratch, step by step, so you can follow along and create it yourself. You'll find a free download link for the finished template in the description below. Feel free to pause, rewind, or replay this video as much as you need. My goal is to help you not just learn how to build this template, but also to pick up some handy Excel functions along the way. But before we dive in, let me give you a quick tour of what we're about to create. This template is a weight loss tracker built with a 52-week layout designed for you to track your weight once a week and evaluate your progress. On the left, you'll find the parameters you will configure, from the number of weeks to your preferred unit system, together with a summary of your progress at the top. On the right, you will find your weekly breakdown table, showing weekly values and changes, and on top of it, you can see there's a graph that will show your progress as you go. Now that we've covered the basics, let's dive straight into the good stuff. Let's now go over how to use the template. Step 1 is to set your parameters on the white background cells. So here, column C, rows 18 to 22. You will enter the number of weeks that you want to track your weight, the start date, the initial weight, your target or goal weight, and then the abbreviation of the unit system that you prefer. The fields on C18 to C22, so your parameter for inputs, will be highlighted in yellow if they are empty, prompting you to enter a value. If I just delete them, you can see that they're now in yellow. Step 2 is for you to record your weight once per week in column G, so here, also highlighted in green. You will write your weight starting here on row 19 of column G, right below the weight column. Notice that the template will automatically populate the weeks and the dates here based on your specified parameters. Step 3 is for you to use the dashboard on the left as well as the graph on the top to evaluate your progress and assess any changes that you need to make to reach your goal. And now for the main event, let's dive into the step-by-step guide to building this template from scratch. For this template, we'll break the creation process into 4 main sections. We'll start with the parameters, then we'll go to the weekly breakdown table, then the dashboard on the left, and finally the graph. In each section, we'll handle all the necessary cell values, formulas, and formatting step by step. To make things easier, I recommend you use the exact same cells and formulas that I use. This way, you can compare your version with mine and quickly spot any differences if you run into any issue. And remember, feel free to pause, rewind, or replay this video as much as you need. Let's begin. First thing I'll do is I'll create a new blank sheet. I just did it by clicking on this plus sign here, and I'll keep the original for us to refer to. So first, let's start with the parameter section. We're going to go to cell B18, and then we're going to type in the values. Also, for reference, I'm going to keep the first 2 lines of text so that it looks exactly the same. This is just saying that you need to input your parameters on these cells, 18 to 22, and then enter your weekly weight in column G. Now, I'm going to use the exact same values that I have here for us to keep the reference. So 12, January 1st of 2025, starting at 212, goal of 170 pounds. Now let's do some formatting. So first, you notice that the column width is different against my example. You can see that here I have a column width of 156. And I found that by clicking on the column, then right-clicking, and then going to column width. For column B, it's 21. And then for column C, the value is 21 as well. Then for column D, it changes, and it's 8.11. The units may vary depending on your system configuration. I'm going to copy those values. But what I'm going to do, since I already showed them to you, is I'm going to copy the widths directly. What you should do is to enter the values manually. So 1.56, go back here, right click, column width, 156. And as you can see, column D already had the correct value, 8.11. Now for B and C, what I can do is I can select both, column width 21, and then that matches the column width that I had previously. What I could have also done is I select this, Control copy, go here, and then paste special with Control Alt V, and then hit on W for widths, and then enter OK. Now obviously there was no change since the values were already there. Now for the format of the parameters, let's start with the background. By the way, these colors will appear if you select the same color palette that I am using right now in Page Layout, Colors, and then select this blue. You can see that the colors that appear here will be the same that appear here. And from there, Excel will also give you some additional selections below those. Now, the advantage for you to select blue as the palette color is that your colors will match mine, and then you can compare your changes. But feel free to obviously select whichever you want. And you can also change any of those palette colors later on. So now, the background seems to be this green. And then as you can see, it was white font, it was bolded, and it was center aligned. And then it also has some borders where the line is white. And then we can select on all borders. There you go. Once we have that, actually the green is a bit different. You can see it's the second from bottom to top. I'm just going to change it so that it's exactly the same, but feel free to use whichever you want. Now you can see that row 6 is a bit higher in my base template, so here on the left, compared to my right. So just for the purpose of comparing, I'm going to already change the height of that row. I select row 6, right click, row height, and then I'm just going to copy this value. The number that you see here probably resulted just from increasing the font size of weight loss tracker label, and then the row simply resulted in that size. Most of the row sizes or column widths are pretty much arbitrary, so you can also play with them if you want to change any. Let's now copy the format of weeks to start date, initial weight, goal weight, and units. What you can do is, once you have these format, you can do two things. You can do copy, then select the cells to which you want to copy that format, and then either go to paste and then in here select paste formats, or you can also do Ctrl-Alt-V, hit T, and then OK or Enter. Or I'm going to do Ctrl-Z now. You can also do Format Painter functionality. So you go to the cell, click on Format Painter, and then you paste the format all across. What I've done in my copy of Excel is that I've added a shortcut for Format Painter in the Quick Access tool. So if I hit Alt-1, it already triggers Format Painter, as you can see it's selected here, in case you see me doing that instead of going and clicking on it. And now that I compare them, I see that I added a border that's too thick. So let's change that. In Line Style, the thinner one, and then hit again all borders. Now for this parameter section, I'll do two things. First, you don't need to, but you can specify that the background is white. And then I will also add borders, but now they're going to be gray. Then I'll center them. And then also remember that we have a format that essentially triggers a yellow color whenever there's no value here. How are we going to do that? We're going to go to conditional formatting, and then we can do one of two things. We can create the rule from scratch, then select the colors and the font and the background, but that's too much work. So we're just going to do highlight, and for now, we're just going to click whichever, greater than, for example, since it's the first one. I'm just going to click 0 so that I just have a value here and I can see the format. And I'm going to choose yellow field with dark yellow text. Hit OK. Go back to my rules, conditional formatting, manage rules. And then here, I'm going to put edit rule. And then format only cells with, I'm going to use this dropdown and select blanks. So only cells that are blank, that means no value, will be highlighted in yellow. Click OK, click apply, click OK again. Now if I delete this, there you go. There's my yellow color. And now one more thing, comparing against my example, you see that these two are in a number format with 1 decimal. So I'm going to select my two numbers. I'm going to go to number format, and then I'm going to click on number, and then I just need to decrease 1 decimal. And that's the parameter section. Let's now go to the weekly breakdown table. So the weekly breakdown table is this one on the right. Let's start by typing in the headers. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the values, but you can go ahead and type them directly. Starting on cell E18, I'm just going to hit Ctrl-Alt-V for values. And that's as if I had typed week, date, now weighting pounds, pounds, percentage, pounds, percentage. But that's not really what the template is doing. What we're doing is week stays, date stays, but now what happens if I change this to, say, kilograms? Now this didn't update, but if I go back to my template, kilograms, you can see that weight changed and it now says kilogram, and then also kilogram here and kilogram here. So if I click on here, you can see that there's a formula. You can see that the formula says the label text, which is surrounded by quotations, and then the ampersand, which means append, and then another text, which is space, and then open parenthesis, then appending the value of cell C22, which has the label for the equivalent of my units abbreviation, then another append, and then the closing parenthesis. So I'm going to do this formula, but I'm going to do it now here. So now remember, I need to use double quotation marks whenever I specify a text in the formula bar or in my formula of a cell in Excel. And then the ampersand is just appending values, which can be the value of a cell, like this one, the value of another formula or function, or the value of more text values, like the others. After I hit enter, it now reads weight kilograms. And this one's easier because I just need the reference. So equals C22, and then equals C22. And I can convert this back to pounds, and there you go. Now, let's adjust the widths. As you can see, all these columns have the same column width, which I can find out by right-clicking and then seeing that the value is 14. So I'm going to input that value. Again, right-click after you select the columns. 1, 4. OK. And then I'm going to do another lazy thing. I'm going to copy this format into this label. So Alt-1 in my case, or Format Painter. And then after I've done this, I'm just going to change the color. Now I did this because I also have borders, and I don't want to put them again. So I'm going to copy that into date, and then I'm going to use this one for weight, pounds, and then I need to use the same one, but just using a darker and a lighter shade of gray for the other two. So let's do the darker one first, probably this one, and then the lighter one, probably this one. Yeah, that seems correct. And then once I have that, I can just copy the values, the formats, and there you go. Now I'm going to change this to pounds again so that it matches. And now I'm missing two other labels. These two. Again, you're going to type them directly. I'm just going to copy the text, but you're going to type change versus initial weight on H17, and then on J17, change versus prior week. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these formats, again with Format Painter. And then after both cells are selected now, I'm going to merge them. So as you can see, this is a whole cell, and it's been highlighting column H and I because I have merged them. And what I can do is I can grab the format with Format Painter and then paste it into the other one. And very quickly, we have our headers. Now, what to do with the rest of the table? Let's start with the layout. So we mentioned this has 52 weeks. So for the 52 weeks, this will end in row 70. So let's start with the layout. First, I'll select all the rows until 70. And the way I did that is I click on the first one, then hit Shift, and then whatever I input my next selection, you can see that the range is updated. So I'm gonna go back to row 70. And then, for example, if I'm missing only 3 rows, I can keep holding Shift and then down arrow key, down arrow key, down arrow key. And there you go. Next, I need the borders. And next, right now I'm gonna color everything in gray, but I know this one is gonna be in white. Now, the only purpose of the white versus the non-white background cell is for me to indicate that these are values that I can change, such as this one. And then the rest, including the dashboard, is going to be fully automated, so I don't have to change it. Now, next up, we want to specify number of weeks as well as dates. But I want that to happen automatically. I don't want to every single time write down week 1, week 2, week 3. And I also want that to be dynamic. So I could have already predefined 52 weeks. But what happens if I don't want the full 52 weeks and I want everything to be adapted? So for that, I chose to use this formula, the sequence formula. Let's see how that sequence formula plays out. I'm going to go here, equals sequence, and then I'm going to hit C18, which is the one that specifies the number of weeks that I want my tracker to display. As you can see, it dynamically showed me from 1 to 12 in one size increments. That is by default the result of the sequence formula. But then I just don't want just sequence. I want that to be paired with week. So as you can see in this formula, I am referring to appending E18, which is the header, with a space, and then with the sequence, 1 to whichever value I have specified on C18. So let's do that. Remember, double quotation for text. And there you go. By the way, if the space is not there, see how it looks. Sorry, I was missing the ampersand. You can see that there's no space in between week and the number, but I don't like that. So I'm going to just revert back, and I'm going to re-add the space. Now, one last thing. I need to go all the way down and center this content. And you could see that there's another thing going on here. So why is this if error preceding the function that I just added? What happens if I delete this? Now it says error calc. And remember, in Excel, every single error starts normally with a pound sign and will most likely end with an exclamation mark as well. This is because it doesn't know what to do when sequence is 0. That's an error. So what you need to do is you need to say if anything happens or goes wrong, then the value that you will display is nothing or blank. The if error works very nicely. What you specify is your normal operation result, and then if anything goes wrong, then you specify the blank. That way, you don't see the error. It's masked. If I write here 12 again, there you go. Now you can see that my formulas are the exact same. Let's now move on to the date. Now the date is pretty easy because I already know when it's starting. I specified it. And then from then on, what do? Since it's weekly, I just add 7 days. And now I could do these forever, but then this won't match my 12-week selection because if this is dynamic, then these dates should also be dynamic. And the way to do that is essentially to just check if there's a value here. So what we can do is say, okay, if there's something here that's different than nothing, then put my date. And if not, then put nothing. And for this, I can do something very similar. If there's something here that is different than nothing, then do the previous date plus 7. And if not, nothing. And then I could copy these and then put it here. And then copy the formulas. Ctrl-Alt-V triggers this paste special menu. And then formulas and OK. And there you go. And remember, dates in Excel are really numbers. It's just an index that is based out of the original date. So the original date, or date 0, if you're curious, you can see that date 0 in Excel is just a non-existent date. It's going to be starting on 1, and that's going to be January 1st of 1900. And the same thing, second date is the second day of January, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to revert. There you go. And I'm just going to copy these format into every single row. Paste special formats. And then I'm going to center this. But now there's a little problem here. This is dynamic. So if I put 40, you can see that 40 dates and 40 weeks show up. But then if I put 52, which is the limit to which we have designed this table, it goes all the way to 52. But see what happens if I specify, say, 53. Now I have 53 weeks, which, of course, it's outside the format I have defined. But then my dates did not update because the formula is no longer found starting on row 71. So what I can do is, instead of playing with this if empty, I can do something very similar to this. I can do a sequence with an if error, but now the sequence has to be adding up to some initial date. So I'm going to actually copy this formula. I'm going to paste it here. Oh, before we do that, let me delete this. Then we copy this formula. And then obviously this E18 is no longer needed. And now this needs to be an offset of the start date plus my sequence. But you're going to see immediately that something's off. So while I have now solved for the problem of 53 weeks, I have two additional problems. First, it doesn't start at my initial date. It starts 1 day later. And also my date is not weekly. It's increasing day by day sequentially. So what do? I can multiply by 7. And that solves the issue of the weekly breakdown. But now the issue is that it didn't start on the 1st, it started on the 8th. So I just have to essentially have a -1 here. But this is also not going to work. So I need to offset by a week, so 7 days. And when I do that, it now started on January 1st, and then week 2 updated automatically, and so on and so forth. And now the only reason I did this is because if you want to increase the number of weeks and say have a template for, I don't know, 100 or more weeks, then you only need to update the formatting and not update the formulas. You can see that my formulas are the exact same as my example. Now let's specify 12. Back on track. Now, for now, I'm just going to specify the weight as if I were filling these out. These numbers are just illustrative. So I'm going to copy them. And if you want your template to look exactly like mine, feel free to pause and just enter these values. And I'm going to copy the same format here. I'm going to do number and then decrease 1 and then center. There you go. And now we have two interesting columns. We have, or rather sections. We have a change against the initial weight. So obviously my 212 against 212, which is my initial weight, or my 220 or 215 or 210 against that same weight. And then we have against the prior week. So that means 220 against 212, 215 against 220, and so on and so forth. Let's start with the simple one. So easiest thing to do is I just do equals, then my initial weight minus my current weight. But that's obviously not going to hold entirely because it always needs to be compared against C20. So I need to freeze these. That means I need to specify $sign on column, $sign on row. You could do without the $sign on C, but it's very easy to freeze the entire thing if you click on F4, and it will add automatically the $sign on C as well as on 20, that is column and row. And by the way, if you cycle through the F4, you'll see that if you continue clicking it, it will start adding the different frozen formats. So nothing fixed, everything fixed, only row, only column, back to nothing. But then this also still doesn't solve everything, because what happens if I do, for example, this? That's not really right. It should set something different. Or what happens if I do this? Is that really accurate? I don't think so. Also, the way I'm specifying this right now is I'm subtracting from the initial the current weekly weight. So that means in terms of change, it will show positive when I really want it to show negative when I have lost because it has decreased. So we also have to change these from order. The answer to all of our problems is this formula. So the formula goes like this. This is a familiar term we already have, which is just subtracting in the other way that I was specifying, the weight for the week minus my initial weight. But then you can see that there's all these other things. Let's start thinking, what are we specifying here? First, I have an and condition, because remember, I said what happens if I have not specified a weight for the week? What happens if my initial weight is also not specified? And what happens if my week is not really valid here? Because remember, all the formulas are already going to be here. So if I didn't have this term, and I was on week 13 in this case, there would be some value, but it doesn't really have to be any value there. So I need three conditions. I need for the weight to be specified that week, for my initial weight to be set, and for the week to be valid, and thus the and condition. So if I have specified some weight larger than 0, if my initial weight set something larger than 0, and then if my week, so this label is something different than blank. And all of this is wrapped in an and then that is the true condition, the logical test for my if function. Now, if the if turns true, so if all these conditions are met, then I will do the subtraction that we just discussed. But if nothing, one of these things is false, so I have not set either the weight for the week or the starting weight or the week's not valid, then blank will be set. Now, all that I have to do is center this, and then I will simply copy the formula. Paste special formats, no, formulas. And then formats. And there you go. Now, as you can see, despite week 11 still being valid, and because I set my initial weight, there's nothing to be shown because no weight for that week has been specified. Let's now go to the percentage column. Now here we will have something very similar because we only want something to be shown if it's the case that it needs to be shown. And the way we solve that is through this formula. So again, the if nth, you're already familiar with that. Now the conditions are that h is different than nothing because this already solves for a lot of different things that I need to verify. If there's a value here, that means that it's a valid week and I have a weight and I have an initial weight. And then the next condition, it's a bit redundant and we could do without because as H said, H19 is already checking for the existence of E19 as well. So let's actually delete it. It's not needed. And then the value that I want, if, actually, given that the AND condition now only has one value, you can see that the other is optional because it has this closing bracket and opening bracket surrounding logical 2. I can actually make do without nth. And I can say only if there's a value in h, in this case 19. So if that is different than blank, then let's divide by C20. And if that's not the case, just put nothing. Now there's no need to put an error or if error, because remember, I have already guaranteed by doing the condition that H19 is different than blank, that I already have 3 values. I have specified a value for the week, my week is valid, and then my initial weight is set. So in this case, for example, nothing will happen. And you don't have a problem with dividing by 0 because if this is 0 or nothing, then this won't work and it will show no value. And if it doesn't show any value, then this doesn't show any value either. I'm going to actually update this formula back in my example because it's cleaner. There you go. And now let's do the last 2 columns. So change against the prior week. Now, for obvious reasons, this row 19 needs to be left empty because there is no prior week to week 1. So we skip this. And then for the next one, we could simply say, well, this against the prior week. And in this case, I increase my weight by 8 pounds. But will that be enough? The answer, as you might have guessed, is no. Not if we want this to be clean without any errors or without showing any zeros when there's nothing to be shown. So, back to our familiar if-and structure. We check for, again, the existence of value for, in this case, week 1 and week 2, as well as the existence of a week 2. If those 3 conditions are met, then we just subtract the current week minus the prior week. And if those conditions are not met, nothing is specified. And we can copy these. As well as the formats. There you go. And now we're missing the percentage. Now the percentage follows a similar rule as for column I. Then all that remains is for us to say if j, in this case 20, is not blank, which implies all the conditions that we mentioned, then simply divide J20 by J19. And if any of those conditions are not met, J20 is going to be blank, and therefore we also want this to be blank. Now we specify a format, which I'm just going to grab from here. And then I'm going to do Control Copy. And in this case, I'm going to just do Control V. I don't need to go through the formulas and formats since I want to copy everything. There you go. Now let's see what happens if I delete everything here. Obviously, these values cannot be deleted because they're values, not formulas. So the only problem is that it doesn't say anything. It's just wait, empty parenthesis, and then 0, and then 0. If you want, you can validate that with an if, and then specify that there's a default like pounds, or nothing is shown. But for now, I'm not going to do anything about it. That concludes the weekly breakdown table. Let's now take a look at the dashboard. And we'll start with the up left side of the dashboard, and then we'll move to the graph. So, as before, let's copy these as labels. So B8. There you go. You input directly current week, current weight, weight loss. And then there's another label. There's a goal completion, and then there's an elapsed time. Again, this is as if I had just typed goal completion and elapsed time. And then let's see what happens with this. This is actually a merged cell. So let's create those two now. You can see that it's B from 13 to 16, and it has a font size of 20. So, to 16, merge 20, and then we also want it to be middle aligned. And then we have this format, but we're missing the borders. Let's just make sure the style is the narrow one, the color is gray. Then we do all borders. Now remember, this is a single cell now because it's merged. So doing all borders or outside borders, in this case, it's the same thing. I can just copy with Format Painter. There you go. And then again, because we're lazy, we copy these into every single one. Format Painter again. Format Painter. There you go. And now we can also do this. We can do this. But now we just remove this conditional formatting because we're not interested in this showing. So we do conditional formatting. And then we do clear rules from selected cells. Or what we can also do is to go to manage rules and then make sure that everything ties up. And delete just this rule. It's the same way. And though the effect is the same, I prefer doing the clear rules from selected cells because in some instances, Excel might actually create the same rule for two different regions and then just append the region to the rule. And if we delete the rule, then we also delete it for the other region. In this case, let's see if this range is still intact. It is, and it didn't appear as if the range was just appended to the formula. Sorry, the conditional rule. But better to be safe than sorry. Now, going back, there's also this weight loss objective. Let's do that now, since we had forgotten about it. I'm gonna just paste the value, so you can type weight loss objective, and then again, lazy, copy the format with Format Painter, and then this is actually gonna be in some gray background, and this as well, because these are formulas. So these are not to be touched, not to be modified. Now, how do we get this, the weight loss objective? We can just subtract this minus this. But then again, there's something that needs to be taken care of if any of these two values are empty. We can for now ignore it, since there's no issue that's going to happen. If I just delete everything, it will say 0, but no error will happen. So I'm going to leave it like that for simplicity. Now, let's find out how do we actually go about the current week, current weight, and weight loss. Now, as you can see, current week and current weight can be deducted from this table. What you have here is that I'm going to be specifying my weight week after week. So for my first week, it'll probably just look like this with my initial weight. And then as I progress, I'm going to append a new row here. That means that if I count the number of values, assuming you fill out these sequentially and not leave anything empty, then that will give me the total number of weeks that have gone by, or the current week that I'm in. So what I'll do is I'll just put a formula with count of the entire range, and that'll give me my current week. If I delete this, it'll say 0, right? Which is, something that could be an error. And if you don't like the 0, you can say that if this count is 0, then put no value, and then if not, then put the count. But for simplicity, I'm just going to leave it like that. Now for the current the current weight. Now that we know that we have a 10-week value for weight, we just basically need an index formula. So the formula that I want to write down is an index of this array, the entire range, and then index of current weight, or current week, sorry. And then no column specify. And there you go. But the problem, as I was saying, what happens if the value 0 appears? Again, errors in Excel have pound sign and then exclamation mark. And what you can do here is do an if error. So not just an if error, but we're actually going to protect this so that there's a condition. So I'm going to do if this is larger than 0, then I'm going to do the if error of the same formula that I have, the index of the range for my current week as the index. And then if there's an error with this index formula, nothing will be shown. And if this is not larger than 0, nothing will be shown. You can really just do without this if error and then just add the if C8 is larger than 0. But I like if error just because there might be something that you have not thought about, and the if error might actually protect against some future mistake that you have not thought about. So let's leave it there. And now if I delete this, for example, then nothing's shown. And now my weight loss, how do I calculate that? I know what my starting and my current weight is, so I just need to subtract those two. But it's not as simple because I can increase my weight. And what happens if I increase my weight? For example, if I just do my initial minus the current, oops, wrong cell, sorry. I'm just going to do my initial minus my current. I have 37. But what happens if I'm on week 2, for example? I have minus 8. That means that I have lost minus 8 kilograms, or in this case, pounds. If that's the case, that means that I have increased my weight. But probably you don't want a negative value, to appear here. If you don't want a negative value to appear there, you must protect your formula. That means that the value that you want here is the max between 0 and whatever number this throws out. So in the case of minus 8 pounds, 0 will be shown because 0 is greater than any negative number. And also, you might want to add an if error just in case anything goes awry, because if you have not specified any of these two values, something might go wrong. So let's just leave it like that. Again, blank specified if there's something wrong. And then if I do this again, voila, 0 appears. And now let's do the goal completion and the elapsed time. Now the 0 is also important because the goal completion is essentially going to show me the distance against my target. So how much have I lost of my target? That means in this case, What percentage of 42 does 37 represent? So I just want essentially to say my weight loss divided by my objective, and then add a percentage. But there's one slight problem. What if I lose more than my weight loss objective? I mean, it could be totally fine if you want to have a goal completion of 150 something or something larger than 100%. Since that's not the case for me, I want to add the minimum of 1 or 100% and my resulting value. And there's another issue, the issue where there's a 0 here in the denominator. And to protect me against that, I add an if error where nothing is displayed if there's an error. Another thing I just noticed, this is missing a decimal, just to be consistent. And this was actually 172 in my example. So now these two match. All right, now elapsed time. Elapsed time is how much time has gone by, right? So 0% of my time is gone at the beginning, 100% is gone by week 12. Since we already know what's my current week, and we know that this is 12 weeks long, I essentially just need to do 10, or current week, divided by the total number of weeks. And then put a percentage in there. This is obviously prone for the same errors. So we're going to add a mean of 1. So in case, for example, you continue adding up values, but then your weeks are not updated. So I'm going to put mean 1, then the formula. And then I'm also protecting against dividing by 0 with if error. So very similar formulas. Now let's do the graph portion of the dashboard. Now graphs can be a little pain because Excel is not the best tool to graph, but easiest thing to do. Select your data, insert, then go to the graph of your choice. In this case, we're going to do this. And then after that, I'm going to do select data. And then as you can see, it thinks I'm entering two series of data, date and weight. I'm going to remove date, and I'm going to edit the horizontal category. And then I'm actually going to select my date range. Then I'm going to hit OK. OK. And there you go. Now, instead of dates, I could have also selected week 1 all the way to week 12. Well, in this case, all the way to row 70. So do as you please. I'm just going to leave it like this because it's the example. And then there's no really scientific way of actually putting a graph where you want it. It's just about looking and seeing where it looks kind of good. So I'm just going to try my best to match where I put the graph last time. So it's around E8. So something like this. Then it goes all the way here. And then it's a bit more narrow. Let's see. There you go, something like that. And then you can see that the format is not exactly the same as I had. So how do you change that? You select your graph, then you go to chart design. And then here in add chart element, when you click down here, you can do a bunch of things. So I don't want any legends, for example. So I click none. That takes care of this. I don't want any titles. So chart title, none. That takes care of that. And then I also don't want any grids, just comparing against the previous one. I mean, feel free to leave any element that you want. So in this case, the grid, here, grid lines, it's selected by default the primary major. I'm just going to click, and that's going to unselect it. And then the other thing that needs to be done is I need to add a border, which you do in format after selecting that. So shape outline, then seems to be this one. Again, trying to match that it looks the same. I'm not gonna make it because it's very hard. And then after that, the line's a bit darker. So the way I do that is I click here, and then you can see that these are my data points. Then I'm gonna go to right click, and then format data series. And then here, I'm gonna click on fill and line, and then I have the automatic, but in this case, I'm gonna do the darker color. Oh, it was actually not that one. It's this one. There you go. And then all that it's left is for me to create these weight loss tracker header. So again, what I'm gonna do, whoops, I'm just gonna copy this value. And then after that, lazy stuff. Format painter all across, merge. And by the way, you also don't need to select the entire thing. You can just do format painter of the first one, select the entire range, and then merge. And then I'm gonna middle align. And then actually, this is font 20. So 20. And there you go. Now the only thing that's left is to add the gray background color, which I like because it looks pretty neat. I'm just gonna do this quickly, and I'm gonna speed up the process, but you can or you cannot do it if you want. Also, by the way, there's this column width that, just for the looks, needs to match column A. So I'm gonna copy the column width, paste special column widths, and there you go. Now onto the background color. Once the background is there, I also like to go to view and then unselect grid lines so that it looks cleaner. And I think that's it. Now, one extra thing before we say our goodbyes. How to add additional weeks or rows into this template. So how you would do that is you would just insert rows before the last one, so before 70, and then after row 25. That means starting on 26. That's the way you just don't mess up with the format, and you ensure that conditional formatting is still applicable, and then all the ranges, inclusive of your graph, remain applicable. So let's say I want to do 53 weeks, for example. Right? I need another row here. So I'm going to do between 26 and 70. So whichever. I'm going to click, right click, insert. And then as you can see now, the formatted was copied because I just inserted it. And then one last thing remains. So if I go to formulas, show formula, you can see that everything is still tied up, but this row doesn't have anything. The row that I inserted, it's empty. So what I need to do, you don't need to go to show formulas, by the way. That was just for the purpose of showing that something's missing. You can simply copy these values starting on row 20 actually, or let's do row 21. It's the same. And then just go all the way down and then click on formulas. And that's it. If I go back to show formulas, after inserting those formulas, you see that everything is complete. Row 30 now has the appropriate formulas. And now since I have specified 53, you can see that my graph automatically is showing the 53 weeks, and it's showing up till the point where I'm currently at. 19% of my time has elapsed, and obviously since this is just illustrative data, 93% of my goal has been completed. Let's go back to 12. And there you have it. And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or drop a comment below to let me know what you think. If you're into Excel and want to learn more, consider subscribing to my channel. I'll be posting more tutorials and courses to help you level up your spreadsheet skills and create awesome templates and tools. And hey, if you're in the hunt for more productivity and planning tools, check out my store. The link's in the description. Until next time, stay productive, stay awesome.